Greetings everyone, welcome to this new build guide. We're gonna take a look at the Spectre builds here. And more accurate, we're gonna go with the slave drivers here. And we have a lot of minions. We have right now, without hitting Val skeletons, I have 29 minions at any time. So I'm basically utilizing everything. And this is the extremely tanky build. And it has extremely good DPS. You are basically never gonna die. First of all, we have about close to 9k life or effective health pool, and we have a bunch of auras that work in our favor. We have a lot of defensive layers, and when we hit Val skeletons, we have about, I don't know, 70 minions around us that all soak up all the damage. So we basically never get hit, but even if we get hit, we have a huge buffer of all these defensive mechanics. So without further ado, we're just gonna jump into the build guide and hope you get it all. We are gonna start with the gear I've chosen for this build. There are so many gear pieces that can be interchanged by others, but I'm gonna go through what I have and also give some suggestions what you kind of want depending on your budget. So let's start with the go-to when it comes to Spectres and other, well, general minion builds is the Victoria's Charity. It gives us the chance to grant frenzy charge to nearby allies on hit. So when we hit with any of our spells, it has a chance to give our minions frenzy charge, which is great. Movement speed, they have more cost speed and attack speed and so on, which is pretty great. And also on Blight hunters, I'm using my skills so often, the Armageddon brand I'm using here. It's gonna kill things sooner or later. Which means that I also get power charge on those kind of encounters. So I usually have 3 of both, which is a great buff. So this is a really cheap version of, yeah, that I would not change. So this is just a few chaos to buy. Very good. And we're just gonna go over to our wands, which is next one. And the new Convoker wands, which were introduced now in 3.8, is very overpowered. I'm saying this one is just insane because it is 9 new mods, I believe, they can run or roll, which is applicable to minion builds. So first of all, we have minions have a elemental resistance, we have accuracy for minions, we have increased attack speed and cost speed, which is a hybrid, as you can see here if I'm holding down Alt, and which means the cost speed, especially for our Spectres, is huge. Even though the number is not very high, it's a really good multiplier. And then we have minions deal increased damage, which is obviously a very good stat. And that could also be a hybrid together with mana. So that means you could also craft yourself a minion, which is up to 50, I believe, minion damage, which means you can end up with like 100 minion damage in the end if you're lucky with the rolls. But the most important one is the +2 level of all minion skills, which is the second highest there on my wand. That means all skill gems. That doesn't mean the support gems. Very important to distinguish between those because many people do the mistakes of these. And that means the Raise zombies, skeletons, and our Spectres, and our animated guardian, and our golems. Those are all gonna be buffed by 1 level. And because of the mechanics where you hit certain breakpoints, where you get 1 more of something, you maybe get 1 more zombie for when you reach a certain gem level. These are very good because it lets you get there much faster, and also it's a huge damage boost and also survival boost for your minions because they get so much more life and everything is just better. So that one is the most priority number 1, of course, but it is an expensive mod. So I would just go with all the other stats, especially increased damage and cost speed in the beginning, and then just fill up with minion life or something like that, or resistances. So this one, obviously good. You can also go with a 2-hander. I know a lot of builds are going with a Pledge of Hands. I will also leave a link in the description to a build guide, which I highly recommend if you like to read about it and stuff like that. and I've been going through the forums there with a fine-tooth comb and just looking what other people are doing, because obviously you want to crowdsource this. You want to make sure that you are getting the best, because you're not going to think of all the uniques and all the mods out there. You're just going to miss things. So Pledge of Hands gives you Spell Echo, level 30 I believe, on it. And it actually stacks together with the Spell Echo we have in our Link setup, which is one of our most, if not the most strongest support gem for this build. So it actually stacks up with that one, which is, I don't know why, but it just does. So you can have 2 support gems, which is the strongest for this. That makes it a 7 link, or even stronger than a 7 link, because it's level 30. So let's go to the next item before I'm just grouping the rest up, basically. It's the Devouring Diadem. I know this one can cost a little bit, but I think it's well worth it, and I'm gonna show you why on our skill tree. Because it gives you Eldritch Battery. Eldritch Battery is up here, and that means your energy shield, you can see my energy shield here in the bottom corner, is on the mana side. That means now when I have Eldritch Battery, and that means I can use up 100% of my mana to reservations and still cast spells, because it's gonna use my energy shield instead as mana. And together that with Mind Over Matter, that means if I get hit, I get 30% of my mana is taking the hit, which is my energy shield here. So those combos are really nice. But of course you don't need to do this. It's just I had currency and I saw that people were looking at these, and I like thinking to myself, and the Feast of Flesh also gives you energy shield, and it just triggers every 5 seconds. It gives you an extra defensive boost, because it's just gonna heal you constantly every 5 seconds. And the other stats are so good. It gives you level to Soccer Gems. This one is just made for this build, I believe, and I would highly recommend it. Otherwise you can go with one of those minion gems build that it gives extra levels to Soccer the Gems, to minion gems that is, and which is very good of course also. I know that the Elder one is going for like 6 Exalted if you want the ones that can actually roll +3. But those are extremes, and you can buy a +2 for a few chaos, I believe. So very important if you want some extra and you want to use up all your mana, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the next section. Next one is our Amulet, and because we are not going up and taking Eldritch Battery, we are gonna take Ravenous Horde here, because it's a very good node, and that means we save so many skill points of getting there. So we are picking that one as our anointed talent, and otherwise on all these gear pieces, because we have so many rare pieces, we can just go with any kind of stats, because we're getting a lot of resistance from our Ascendancy and our passive tree, and that means we are free to just maximize our life and energy shield. You do not need to go for energy shield, which makes it even more cheaper, which I'm gonna probably show in my 1 Exalted Shaper Challenge. This one is gonna be extremely cheap to get going. Otherwise, I just want some solid stats, some dexterity if you're deciding to use Phase Run, which I recommend, because yeah, it's just a good skill overall. It gives you a lot of movement speed, clear speed and stuff like that. So that gives you a lot. Next one is our rings, because I have a little bit, this is the only negative thing here, it is very hard to get enough gem slots or sockets. That means I went with an unset ring here to put my Phase Run into. But if you just taking away something, I guess I could have taken away Portal, but I hate running around with a Portal scroll, so it's completely possible. I think these gem setups are the ultimate way of doing things, but of course you need to fix it for your playstyle. Otherwise you just want energy shield, life, and you want some resistance, and even if you can, you have an open suffix, then increased movement speed is extremely powerful, because that means increased clear speed. Your minions are getting to all the next packs much faster than they normally would. For my other ring, I went with so I crafted Aspect of the Avian on there. You can do that in Menagerie if you have an open suffix, which is very good. The Aspect of the Avian gives us or your minions movement speed, you and your minions movement speed, and then double damage for your minions, plus 10 I think. It alternates, so 4 seconds of one buff and the 4 seconds of the other one, so very good. So both of those are excellent. You can also go with Aspect of the Spider, which debuffs the enemy by 15% if you stand close to them, damage taken that is, and that is really good and hinders them also, so it makes them slower. So both good, but I just went with this one because you don't need to be close to anything. Other gear pieces, we're gonna go with the chest last. It's just gloves, and because I'm starving on dexterity, I just went with high energy shield, maximum life, and just dexterity as much as I can. There's nothing really important there. Stygian Vice is definitely recommended because you can get some insane jewels in this build, like really good one. This one is probably not the best example, but I have some really good one in the tree. Obviously you want the energy shield, maximum life and stuff like that on these also, and just fill up your resistances. For our boots, we are going with life again, and because this one is probably my weakest piece, it's only because I want the increased movement speed and a chance to dodge spell hits, because obviously the ones that are gonna hit me is probably the spell hits, because they're gonna shoot from a distance, even though my minions, like multiple minions, is gonna block most of it. Some might get through and stuff like that. So this one is a really good mod if you can, but otherwise I'll just go with increased movement speed. And you want as much energy shield. If you're stacking energy shield, just go with as much as you can and just fill in the blanks. So finally we're gonna go with our chest armor. It's very important that if you go for the plus to maximum specters, which is a 25% boost to your overall damage, because you get 1 extra, is your main damage source anyway, is that you go with an armor that has energy shield on it, because otherwise if you don't do that, you're gonna need 6 blue sockets. That means 6 off colors of coloring in the end, and that is like, yeah, highly unlikely it's gonna happen. There's ways of doing this, but it's gonna cost a lot and take a lot of time. So otherwise I just went with the maximum number of specters, life, energy shield, chaos resistance. So I'm pretty high on chaos resistance, so if I was gonna change anything on my build, I would probably add a little bit more chaos resistance, so I can go and get capped here. I'm a fair way there, so a little bit more on my gear and I could actually get capped on chaos res also. So all of these can be replaced by normal rare gear for just a few chaos, and yeah, there's a lot of possibilities to change things around. So let's go to the next part. For our flask, we're just gonna go with some generic flask that most builds use. I don't see the need of any unique flask, but if you do, please tell me in the comments. For our first flask, we're gonna use the Bubbling Divine Flask of Adrenaline. You don't need the adrenaline part, but your Bubbling Divine Flask is really good because it reduces the amount recovered, but you get some instantly, and that is good in some oh no kind of moments when you are getting hit, especially in Blight, where if you stand on the tendrils, you can get some really nasty degen on you. So those can be some very good defensive mechanics if you're just getting hit very hard by an ability or something like that, on one of those floating balls that explodes on you. Next one is the Basalt Flask. What I recommend on all of these is to have one, there is bleed immunity, of course, super important, most important actually. And one that is cursed, that means that all the curses from map mods, you can just disregard those, temporal change, What is it? More elemental weakness, feeble, vulnerability, all of those. As long as you have the Quicksilver Flask up, which you should have pretty much all the time with the amount of enemies you're killing, that means you don't need to worry about those mods, which could be very rippy otherwise. Otherwise, you can also go with shock. So for the Basalt Flask, I went with an additional physical damage reduction. You can also interchange this with any of the other flasks if you want to. I also went with a Quartz Flask. Here also, you want the dodge chance, dodge the spells, dodge normal hits. And then I went with some extra movement speed and just general, which is Onslaught, which gives you 20% more movement speed which is very good. And you could also go with the one that gives you armor, the one that gives you evasion, and if you combine the one with armor together with the Val Molten Shell, you can get some really nice buffs. So if you know you're might get hit, you hit that one and you're basically invulnerable for that kind of duration. So that was something that many people did in 3.7 when it came to Cyclone, just spam those Val skills over and over. So these are my flasks. These are the ones that I recommend. Just make sure you have one for Bleeding, Curse, and then Freeze. Most important, then you can have Shock, and then you just can fill up whatever you want for the rest one. Let's go to the next. For our jewels, we're gonna go with 2 unique ones. Those are not mandatory, but they're gonna be placed in these positions to actually get activated. And make sure you do and get the most out of them, basically. You can just forgo these ones. This one can be a little bit pricey, the Unending Hunger, but it's a great way. You get some increased area of effect for your minions, and also you get Soul Eater, which gives your minions tons of cost speed when they kill enemies. So you get a Soul Eater stack and it gives you some stats. You can look it up on the Wikipedia for Path of Exile. Sorry. Then we have also Anatomical Knowledge, which is increased the maximum life, which is obviously we want to stack as much defense we can, and then adds to maximum life per free intelligence allocated in radius. So that is a few points here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 70. So there's quite a lot for this specific area. So that's why we're putting it right there. Otherwise, I went full out on Ghastly Eye Jewel, which is the Abyss Jewel that can roll minion mods. So there's a lot of mods here where we want. Because I don't use Meat Shield on any of mine as a skill gem, then I'm using Taunt on this, which means that because my minions are hitting so fast, they are gonna taunt the enemy, which is damage reduction to you or something like that. So you want to hit some of these. I also have Blind, I think, on one of these. And yeah, here it is. So it also blinds the enemy. Otherwise, you want on everything here, you want Life and Energy Shield if you can. It's gonna get a little bit pricey if you want these, because these are very highly sought after. You can also go with normal jewels. You got just percentage life then, and just some resistance. There are some minion mods on those also. Just look on the PoE database, that is, for which mods are on those jewels. Otherwise, we can have accuracy, movement speed for your minions. We can have a bunch of good stats actually. We can have minion damage and additional flat lightning damage here also. So there's tons of good stats that you can have on these jewels, and you have so great access because I pathed into it. If you want less of these, you path to other nodes if you don't have a lot of currency around, because these jewels are gonna be costly in the end. And I also have one in my Stygian Vice, which is right here. Movement speed I found very important, because it's that means your minions and you are gonna get there much faster. So I have for me and then 8 for them. So those were my jewels that I find very important for this build. Let's talk about our skill gems we use for this build. So there's a lot of skill gems, like I already said in the previous part, and the only thing that is actually bad about this build is that we do not have enough sockets. And because there's so many things that we could put in here, and if you have a favorite setup, just change it around to fit your build. But for our main setup, I think this is the best setup for the slave drivers. You can use whatever minions you want basically, but this is the one that I'm chosen because of the extreme single target and extreme clear. So I think it's a good combination of both when it comes to the slave drivers. So we're gonna have Raise Spectre, of course. Level 21 is very good, and of course we want quality on all our gems because that gives a lot in this build. So quality up your gems if you can, but obviously I went and killed Uber Elder with almost no gear at all, so it's not needed, but it gives a lot in the end. We have minion damage, of course, really good. Concentrated effect, really good, because it doesn't really affect our slave drivers at all, the concentrated effect. So yeah, just something to think about. It gives more area damage there. Elemental Focus, very good one. And Spell Echo, like we already talked about, extremely good because it shoots so fast. The cast speed is just insanely good multiplier for this build. And the Feeding Frenzy gives us Feeding Frenzy buff, which is gonna stack with all our minions here, and it gives us just overall good stats all around. So that is our main setup. I don't think we need, there's no switching of gems or anything, and if you have some better thing to put in here, which I don't see, just please tell me. But I've gone over with a fine-tooth comb on forums and other players, top players and stuff like that. This is the way of building it. For our second setup, it's gonna be our Animated Guardian and Raise Zombies. I have it in my helmet because that gives them one more level, and that means my Raise Zombies will be one more. That means I have not 9 anymore, I have 10 of the Raise Zombies, which were very good together with all the other Ascendancy points and plus gems from the wand and stuff like that. So Animated Guardian Raise Zombies get buffed by Physical Lightning support because yeah, we're a lightning build when we're using slave drivers, so very good. Elemental Army support also, it debuffs, so when our enemies or our minions hit the enemies, that means they are gonna get a debuff of a -10, I think, exposure or something like that. Yeah, that means that our slave drivers is gonna be even more effective on those. So that is synergizing very well. I know I've not talked about the Animated Guardian because they can have a lot of things, especially when it comes to gear pieces you throw on the ground. If you want to look that up, I might do a guide on that in the future, but right now that would just be a 20-minute guide by itself or something like that. So I'm gonna leave a link in the description to this build guide, and in there there's very good explanation on which items you want to use for the cheap version and the more expensive version. Of course, I have the expensive version that gives us Fortify and Calling Strike from my Animated Guardian, which is great, of course. Rest, we have I have a trigger socket spell when you use a skill. So when I'm using my Armageddon brand here, I'm gonna actually cast these skills that are in here, which is Desecrate, which is create corpses on the ground, which I'm using for summoning things, and especially for my next gem, which is down here, is my Summon Skeleton, Wall Summon Skeleton actually, which means that the Summon Skeleton is gonna pop, the wall is just gonna stay there. It does not get triggered by any socketing spells or yeah, anything like that. You need to summon them by clicking. So those are my, oh, I'm getting overwhelmed in Blight kind of a click, and then I have 40 more skeletons all over the place. They just mashes everything. And I also have Flesh Offering, so I don't need to click these myself. I get the Flesh Offering, which is together with my Ascendancy, get affected to me and my minions by 75% to me, at least I believe it is now when it got buffed. So this, if you have a free suffix on your wand, then you can have trigger spell when you use a skill, which means that it's wholly automated. That means so few buttons to click. You can just focus on clicking just the flask, and 2 buttons here basically I have. Otherwise I have Armageddon brand with Curse on Hit and Elemental Weakness. So when I'm using this, it's not for the damage, It is also for getting the occasionally buff here from Victoria's Charity. But what it does is it's just gonna debuff the enemies with elemental weakness. So very good for bosses and blights and everything like that. So highly recommend it. I have Portal in my gloves. You don't need this if you're running around, then you can just disregard this one, but I love Portal. Convocation means that I can summon all my minions to my spot, which is highly recommended because they get slowed down or something by a pack behind, and you have a new pack which is huge, so you can summon it, like keep summoning to the next. So this is basically your main clicking button in this build. You're just gonna summon to the next pack, and then just completely obliterate whatever is there, because you get 29 minions on one spot in an instant. And also it regenerates their life, which probably is not needed because, yeah, they never die anyway. We have meat shield on our golem here. Oh yeah, I had meat shield. So that means that it's gonna give us the taunt effect, I believe. It's on the meat. Yeah, taunt on hit, which is very good. They've debuffed the enemies, but this one doesn't hit that hard often, I believe, so I had it on a jewel on top of that. And also Chaos Golem gives us physical defense, which is very good. You could go with the Carrion Golem, but honestly it buffs mostly, what it buffs is physical damage, and we are kind of going completely elemental, so yeah, it's not gonna give that much. What else do we have? We have Generosity and with Together, which gives the buff effect of our auras, which is Celerity here. We could go with Wrath also, which is probably the much more damage version, but I don't need any more damage honestly, so I just went with this one because it gives us the Consecrated Ground, and it's gonna regenerate some life to us and to our minions on top of this. So I think this one is the more defensive option, especially on blights. And also Flame Dash is very important, because then you can jump over ledges, and just Flame Dash is just useful all around to get around the objects. And finally, I think this is the most controversial one, and this one I did not know about. This is 100% from the build guide when someone mentioned it on the forum in the comments, because Summon Skitterbots was for mines, but it's so good for our build, because it's 2 minions. One gives chill, run around and give a chill aura to all the enemies, and one, the most important, gives shock. Because it's non-specified, it means that the monsters take 20% more damage, because it's 20% shock as base, which means that is 20% like pure damage. This calculated after everything else, which is super good. They take 20% more damage, and plus if you can buff it up. If the more levels it has, it also buffs the effect. So I think we land around 25% more shock in, like, yeah, that is just insanely good for 35% of mana research. So a Skitterbot is a given, and it does not get affected by Generosity, so you don't need to worry about that. So those are my gem links. I honestly would not change them for anything. These are the ones that I highly recommend. And let's go to the next area. For our passive tree, I would go up here and take these minion nodes if you decide to level with minions, which is very good actually. Raise Zombies and Skeletons are extremely strong, and even stronger is probably SRS, which is Summon Raging Spirit. And I would also pick up these because it gives us early mana regeneration, which is something I should probably spec out of right now because I have no more mana, but they also give life and stuff like that. Then after that I would probably go up here, and because if you are leveling with these Raise Zombies, extra Skeletons and stuff like that is gonna be really good, and you're just gonna wanna take this outer part here because that gives you some extra damage, so you want to just opt for the glass cannon kind of build here. Otherwise I would thirdly, go to this area and just get some good good damaging nodes, and then I will also go into this area, because later you are gonna try to anoint this probably, but in the start you're not gonna have that, because it's gonna have 2 opalescent oils, I think the name is, which is I don't know, there's like 50-60 chaos or something like that together. So that might not be a lot for some of you, but it might be so much for others. Next one is gonna be going down here. We're gonna pick up these nodes here, Righteous Army and Redemption, because those are very good. And you can also pick up this one if you decide to, well, while you're leveling and stuff like that. Otherwise, I would not pick up Elemental Equilibrium, because it's just gonna be hard if you don't already are really good with these, because if you pick up the wrong ability, because Elemental Equilibrium work as follows. So if I'm doing, with all my minions, I'm doing either physical or I'm doing lightning damage. And because Armageddon brand is fire, that means I'm gonna hit the enemies with fire damage, both from my flame dash and from my Armageddon brand all the time, which means they're gonna be debuffed by minus 50% resistant to other elements. That means minus to cold, and even more important, to lightning. But if you are mistaken and have some item with a little bit of lightning damage on it, so you want to hover over your Armageddon brand and your flame dash and make sure there doesn't say lightning anywhere there, because if it does, you're doing the opposite. You're making the resistance even higher on those elements. So this one extremely strong used the right way, extremely bad if you're using it the wrong way. So I'm not leveling with it, because I just want to pick up gear as fast as possible. Otherwise, we just want to go with so I use these also, which is very special. You might not want to go with these, because I needed these exact nodes to get to the 0% of mana reservation. That means I could have so many more auras going for myself and so many mana reservation. Without these, I could not make that happen, because I cannot put in an Enlighten. I don't have the gem slot for it. Other ones are important is the Mind Over Matter. You might want to go up to Eldritch Battery. We already talked about this in the gearing section, why I'm using these, the combination that is used for these, and how they synergize so well. Otherwise, you have some really good nodes here when it comes to life, and also plus to all elemental resistance, which is extremely strong, because then you can get 76, and the life wheel here, we're already here anyway, and plus all the gem slots are very important, because you can get some really good jewels, abyss jewels that is. And otherwise, these are probably the weakest one. I'm probably gonna spec out of these and probably spec out of these, and then just use those 5 points for something else. I've just not decided what that is. And while you get into jewels that you need some specific points, you might wanna prioritize those kind of areas so you can just use the jewels. So those are the basic concepts. I know some are going for the face acrobatics over here, but it's such a long track, and you cannot anoint one of those, because you cannot anoint what do you call them, keystones or whatever they call. Yeah, I think this is very good, but this is definitely my weakest area when it comes to this, because there's so many possibilities. So if you have any pathing that would help me overall with both survivability and damage, please tell me so in the comments. Go to the next. For our Ascendancy, we are gonna go with the Necromancer, because obviously we're doing a minion build, and Necromancer is the minion type of Ascendancy. So first one we're gonna take is Mindless Aggression. Movement speed again is very important. Cost speed, damage, give us an early boost to just boost our minions and through leveling and just get going. Second one is Unnatural Strength, because +2 to level all minion skill gems is just insanely powerful. Yeah, that one is just so overpowered in this whole build. So this one would be our second one. For our third one, I would probably go with the Bone Barrier, because not because of the bone armor skill, but because of the survivability, and also 3% to all elemental resistance per minion. And because we're gonna have so many minions, we're gonna have maximum, that is 30% extra percent of early game that we don't need to worry about. We're gonna have extra elemental resistance there. We have recovery rate per minion, and again we get all of these because we have so many minions, and also give some more survivability to our minions with the minion life. Here, when we come to the fourth one with the Uberlab one, we can have some diversity here. I know I went with Mistress of Sacrifice because I like to have the extra movement speed for my flesh offering, and you can also put in a second offering to just buff up yourself and more, but I don't have the links for it. Also, my minion duration is much longer, which means the skeletons are going to be active much longer, which is caused by my wand setup, automatic, which is very good. And also my Val skeletons is going to be up more often. Skill effect duration and everything like flesh offering and stuff like that is gonna be up, and it's just great all around. I know some other are using Commander of the Darkness but then you need kind of put in one extra gem, which is the Clarity gem, just activate the buffs and everything. I don't want to do that honestly, and I don't see the point to it. We already have so much damage. I'd rather just go for this one, which is extra clear speed and some overall comforts. Plaguebringer is something I saw on the forum the other day, and yeah, that one would probably give the most defensive layers when it comes to this, because we are dropping corpses anyway with our cost when use a skill from our wand. So that one is also a good point to be had. For our Pantheons, we are going to use as a major god, we're going to use Soul of Lunaris because it's additional physical damage reduction and movement speed, so it's help us with both when we get overwhelmed by a lot of enemies, and we get extra movement speed, which is great, of course. But it's avoid projectiles have been chained because our minions are standing in our way, and if the enemies are chaining something, that means we are not gonna get hit by those, which is great. So our minions are just taking the brunt of the force, and it does not chain all the way back to us. And there's some other chance to avoid projectiles, very good, where you can stand in a fair distance, chance to dodge attack spell hits if you've been hit recently. So if you get hit after all of this, you still have an extra layer of defense there. So this one is definitely the go-to for this build. For a minor one, I always go with the same, and it's not because of the chaos damage taken, which is of course our weakest point, I guess. We still have a lot on, but it's immune to poison. That means we can disregard all those poison debuffs and stuff like that. So very good and very safe, and there's nothing else that is really coming even close. This is the go-to for every build basically. For our bandits, we're gonna just kill them all for the 2 extra passive points. I don't think any of the other stuff is even worth it, not even close, so definitely just go with the 2 extra passive points. You are gonna need them anyway to buff up your build. I want to thank everyone who has been watching for this long, and you probably skipped through a bunch of these and just gone back and forth while you're actually building up your characters, because I'm so sorry because it took so much time, but there's no other way of doing a minion build. And I even skipped a lot of stuff like the animated guardian and stuff like that. But I thank you immensely for your support, and you can show your support even more by putting a like on this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. I hope you have an awesome day, everyone.